Welcome to the Rock Solid Families Podcast. I am Linda Hutchinson here with my husband, Merrill. How are you, honey?
A little bit better now.
I'm having a hard time
we get our act together.
I'm figuring out what week it is. Christmas is coming. I know that.
It is. Well, that's good.
It's coming.
That's good. We're in December as we're recording anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. So how are you doing?
I know that the days are limited of what's how many days I've got left. How many shopping days I've got left. I actually was on my Amazon cart the other day, and it was saying you can get this still before Christmas, but hurry. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's scary to me.
Days are counting down.
I'm so used to Prime.
When do I get my list from you? My Rambo list.
Oh, the things that you got to go out.
Yeah, like the day or two before. Where
you know, Amazon's kind of helped that. Like,
I feel unemployed.
It's like buy now, 2-day ship, kind of thing. So you're right.
It used to be really important.
You
it used to be valuable, but now
Christmas
not so much.
Eve, I would give Merle that list of the people I can't figure out. And say, please go get something.
Just go figure out. Because I don't have to worry about sales or anything. Linda always worries about sales, and I'm like, no, I'm just going to go buy it and be done with it.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, so
gift cards have kind of helped, but I just don't like gift cards because it's like it feels so.
Isn't it a great Christmas when you exchange gift cards with people? Here's your $50 Outback, and here's your $50 O'Charlie's.
And we're talking about this is part 2 of our question series, and this one is focusing on parenting. Mm-hmm. And so I think about parenting and the parents out there who are starting to panic, like I don't know what my child wants, or I can't afford what they're asking for, or I don't feel like I've got enough for them, or, and so I totally can relate to those parents out there who are feeling the crunch. Now, you don't quite feel the crunch of Christmas.
I don't. I last year's show, we talked about that, and I totally confessed, and because I would do what your dad does. I'd pull out a checkbook, I'd write some checks and say, enjoy. Yeah,
because you don't wrap one present, you don't buy one thing, you don't even cook the turkeys. Oh, you do slice the turkeys.
I slice the turkey. Now, so before you all think really bad of me, it's not because I don't offer. I always say, do you need me to do anything?
But when do you offer? Like the 24th?
No, I offer anytime at all.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, we're focusing on some questions that you have as parents, working on just some of those parenting struggles. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to take some of these questions that we either hear in our office or are sent to us, or common things that we often hear, and try to help. And again, this may not be you or your question, but it probably is going to relate to you and your situation somehow.
Yeah, in many cases, you could just kind of change the name and put your own in there because you'll see something that fits. Yeah. Before we go on, honey, let's thank our sponsors. Let's thank Maxwell Construction, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and the Hoosier Ice House. So we want to thank these guys for sponsoring our show. We also want to thank you guys for listening to our show, sharing our show. That's as much of an important factor for us as anything that the shows are getting shared. And, as we've said before, it's on a regular basis that people come into us and say, hey, I was listening to your show about such and such a topic. And the teaching tool that it is really, to us, really valuable. So,
although we're going to have to come up with some new stories, because we mentioned the blue pants fight last week, and I was with a client, and he listens to our podcast, and he's like, yeah, I've heard that fight many times. Yeah. So I'm sorry.
So, but the problem with that is they're advocating for us to fight more or differently. Yeah. So I was like, well.
Anyway, I'm going to give you the first question because you are the elementary school counselor.
Okay.
And so this is a question about an 8-year-old son who has always been a good student, but lately he's dreading homework. And so what grade is 8-year-old? Second grade? Mm-hmm. He's getting frustrated easily, and he often starts arguing with me about homework. How can I help him develop a positive attitude towards school?
So usually in second and coming into third, he could come into third, just depending. We talk about in the early grades, kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, kids are learning to read. And then there starts to be a transition there that they actually read to learn. And so just depending on the setup there, homework starts to get a little bit harder. Like teachers will say, in my own little words, I'll say, figure it out, right? Versus always being spoon-fed. So it can get a little bit harder in that way. Having to read the instructions yourself and figure those out. Those kind of things start to make it a little bit more difficult. I think it's important. that we start this off right from the beginning, that we set the kids up for success, but we don't hold their hand through every step of it. So that they can, we talk about the idea of how kids get strong and they get self-esteem. The kids have to see themselves having some success.
Yeah.
And without you being there right next to them on every question and really kind of holding their hand. And we just have to admit it. More often than not, we provide the answers, right? So, but anyway, I think when it starts to get a little bit hard, it's time to start to break it down. Chances are your kid's getting overwhelmed because maybe it's not just, hey, read your 10 minutes every night and you're done. And, now we're maybe starting to get a half hour, 20 minutes to a half hour homework. Hopefully not too much more than that at 8 years old. But you might have to break it down. You might have to say, hey, listen, bud, I know it looks like you got a lot there. How about let's work for 10 minutes and take a little breather. I'll check out what you have, and then we'll come back later and get the final 10 minutes. So it's really about them not getting overwhelmed, like they're never going to finish this. You have to remember, 20 minutes in your mind is nothing. 20 minutes in their mind can seem like that's like 2 cartoons, I mean, so that can seem like a lot.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, good job. You got
ready?
That right. Yep.
I got that one right?
Yep.
All right. So this is from Dave. He says, our 15-year-old daughter has been acting distant and withdrawn. Boy, we've heard that before, right? She's been acting distant and withdrawn. She's starting to dress a little differently. She spends a lot of time in her room. We're worried she might be struggling with her identity or her sexuality even. How can we approach this topic without making her feel judged or uncomfortable in the discussion?
Well, it's interesting that it's a dad asking.
Yeah.
Because usually guys are just kind of clueless, like, what's going on with my daughter?
Oh, she'll be fine.
But for him to notice, it seems to be probably concerning for him. And so I would just ask this dad, like, who is she surrounding herself with? Who are her friends? And so part of that is you want to invite those friendships into your home. You want to include yourself in like driving them to the mall or, taking them to the movies. And like you want to try to insert yourself in a healthy way, but realize that a lot of this is a natural pulling away that a teenager does. Okay. They start to identify more with their friends and socially they want to connect with them and share their struggles with their friends more than you. But you want to try to be in their world still and not really harping on this sexuality or this identity issue. I actually had a client that this was her. And mom brought her into me concerned. And we kind of just walked around that topic and really just dealt with other insecurities she had or stresses she had or feelings of not feeling like she fit in. And really the other stuff kind of took care of itself. But I will say this, and we've seen this before, please do not let them camp out in their room. Their room should be a bedroom. And so do not let that be where they hide all day and all night long. And so please bring them out, whether it be they're helping you cook dinner or setting the table, whether you're asking them to watch a movie with you, because the more you can engage, the more you can have a finger on the pulse about what's going on. And when you just kind of let them just kind of disappear and drift away, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors or with the friends that you don't know.
Yeah. So, so you're saying that in like the case you would be talking about, that I'm going to use probably the wrong word, but should we avoid the sexuality conversation with them? Or because you're like saying, well, we'll kind of go around it and it'll work its way out. Is that what you're telling us here? Or
I would say don't be a one topic parent.
Okay.
And that, you can talk sexuality, asking about, they have a boyfriend or that kind of stuff, or how they're feeling about themselves or that kind of things. But more importantly, I see at this age, it's who you're surrounding your daughter with. So do they have a coach? Do they have a teacher? Do they have a youth group leader? Do they belong to Young Life or some other group where they're with young adults who are speaking life into them? Because sometimes if it's just mom or dad, and in this case, it's dad asking this question, so I don't know if mom's even in the picture, who is she identifying herself with? Who is she modeling herself after?
Yeah. Man, you think about those times, hon. Such a time of confusion.
Yes.
And that's why, in the school world, you will have people who will quickly latch on to some sort of group, whether it's the jocks or it's the band people or it's the people who are confused on gender or whatever, but they'll attach to something as a way to connect. So, the confusion can be pretty high there.
So if you have your finger on the pulse of her friends, then you can kind of assess, are there other girls that are dressing different and kind of looking like they are confused or struggling with that, so you can kind of have a better sense of that, or is this just a phase that she's going in where she's pulling away from you? So keep your finger on the pulse and keep connected with her in any positive way you can.
Yeah, and I would say, hon, especially with the way these guys are getting hit by a lot of world messaging, that if you feel as a parent, I just don't know what to do in this, then seek some help. Right? Maybe get some guidance. And we're going to advocate for some, because we're faith-based in what we do. We're not going to apologize for that. We're going to advocate for getting some help through either some Christian counseling or family counseling from the church, something to that effect.
And that's why we hired an adolescent specialist. Bridget is on our team, and this is really her role, where she can kind of be that bridge between you and mom and dad, or her and mom and dad. And we hired her because she's younger.
She's cool.
She's cooler. She hasn't been that long since she's been there. She's worked with teenagers before, so it's so needed in our world today.
All right, good.
You ready?
Got that one right.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. My ex-wife and I share custody of our 7-year-old daughter, Lily. She's constantly going back and forth between houses and is causing a lot of stress. My ex is often late, dropping off, picking up, and she doesn't always follow the agreed upon parenting plan. How can I minimize the impact it's having on our daughter?
Well, let's
see that a lot.
Let's lay something out from the get-go. A lot of times, hon, I think when people come into us with these, they want us to make it all better.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to help it make it better than it was. But the fact that there's a breakup, there's a divorce here, it is a reason. Like, that divorce is ugly. It does hurt. And sometimes
it stinks that she's got 2 houses.
And so some of it, guys, this is why we should do everything we can to avoid these types of things. So with that being said, we still do want to work on this. And our first job is to try to, can we keep a working relationship between the 2 parents, right? Like, if all of a sudden that is severed and they won't even talk to each other, it's just, tenfold in terms of the difficulty that we're going to walk into.
Yeah, child feels it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, and then whether parents will admit to it or not, the child will start to become the old tug of war rope. They'll manipulate through the child. So the first thing here is, Dad, how about, can you sit down with Mom and let's find some common ground areas? You're maybe not everything, but can we find at least some common ground? Maybe can we at least agree that whether in my house or your house, we're going to have a bedtime at 8:00 or whatever it is. In my house or your house, this will be the amount of screen time that she gets, right? So find what we can, because more than anything, what we're trying to do is establish a common value system. You hear us talk about that all the time. And so that's how we want to start. And, if I don't get my way in everything, which, by the way, even parents who live together and who are married don't agree on everything.
Really?
Yeah. So what we do is we want to try to find as much common ground as we can. And a lot of times we get stuck in our self-righteousness of saying, well, no matter what, they're going to bed at 8:00 when they're in my house, when maybe would 8:30 work? Like a little give and takes, because as I've said many times, it's better for you to be united than to be right. It's better to be united than right, because unity will keep the same language that the child hears no matter where they're at, and it lessens the opportunity for confusion in the child's life. Did you hear that, right? It lessens the opportunity for confusion. And so that's really where I'd want to go here, with just trying, let's see where we can clear up and get some unity.
And we talked more about this on a previous show about co-parenting. So if you want more information about the co-parenting part of it, go check out one of our podcast episodes, and I'll have to figure out which one that was a while back that we talked about that. So,
you ready?
Yep.
All right. All right, so this is from Lisa. She says, we have a 4-year-old, looks like a 4-year-old daughter, has lots of trouble winding down at night. She's constantly jumping around and talking.
Is that our granddaughter?
And it's hard to get her to settle down. We've tried everything from reading stories to taking warm baths, but nothing seems to work. How can we get her on a consistent bedtime routine that she'll actually follow? Basically, I think we're trying to wind this child down.
Yes. And it sounds like mom has tried a lot of carrots, okay? Reading stories, taking baths, all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes, remember, you have to use the carrot and the stick. And so as a 4-year-old, it's still pretty young, but sometimes you have to throw a carrot in or a stick in there. And I'm not saying you're getting hit a child with a stick. This is it's a metaphor for consequences.
Even a biblical metaphor.
Carrots are the rewards, consequences are the sticks, okay? And so sometimes, because our granddaughter stayed with us not too long ago, and she doesn't like to go to bed when everybody else goes to bed, and so she is this child, and so we had to let her know, like, if you get out of bed again, okay, there's a consequence.
Right.
And so maybe it is she doesn't get to watch a show the next day, right? Or the next day she has to go to bed even earlier, and so, or she has to stand in a corner or whatever, like there's got to be some kind of consequence where she knows she's not, because sometimes they think it's a big game. They just keep coming out of the bedroom and ha ha ha, back in you go. And so you have to kind of use your parent voice and say, okay, that's it. We're done. You come out again, and so we've had to do this. And sometimes it's just the tone and it's the consequence that comes. And again, it doesn't have to be a severe one, but letting them know we're boss and it's bedtime.
Yeah. And even at 4 years of age, it's really important that the kids start to see the natural sequence of bedtime. So maybe at 7:30, we get to the bath, at 8 o'clock, we get a little snack, we watch a little show. And so when kids start to feel that sequence, even if they can't tell time, they get the sequence and they have an understanding of about how long. And so they kind of know what the next thing is that follows. So that just helps them mentally start to prepare.
Yeah.
And Hannah, I'll say, because you said it, but you didn't really emphasize it, and that is, you can't threaten. You can't go in there and say, come on now, one more time, one more time. Like, we do that one-time warning, and then the second time she has to have that consequence because that's the only way that she knows you mean business. If you're in there 4 times telling her that she's going to get a consequence tomorrow, she's smart enough to know there's not a lot behind this.
Yeah, and that's when I've seen her daddy give her a little spank on the bottom, stand her up,
him in the corner.
Stand him in the corner, And again, we don't want to keep playing this game, and we have to be consistent. So we can't, like you said, we can't threaten one week and we don't do it another day. And so that consistency is important. That lead up is important. And they'll learn. But you got to sometimes use the carrot and the stick.
Yeah.
Okay. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Our teenager, we have a boy and a girl. They never want to help around the house. They're always glued to their phones or computers, and they seem to think that we should do everything for them. How can we motivate them to take on more responsibility and contribute to the household?
It's funny that we have the word motivate. Because I'll go back to your carrot and stick, right? I'll go back to your carrot and stick, and every kid's different. Sometimes you can easily say, hey, you get that done, we'll go do something, and that's enough of a carrot to get them out there. But first off, I think it is important that you recognize as a parent that they didn't just start doing this one day. You've kind of groomed them up.
This.
Yeah, and again, like, don't beat yourself up. We've all done that, and we finally we just got sick of it. We're like, okay, how did we get here? Well, we got ourselves there in most of these cases. So I think it's important that you recognize that you created some habits that are not working very well now. Okay. And like, especially this one here mentions phones and computers. And, when we have the kids who are just mesmerized by their phones and computers, that's on us. We've probably allowed it to be part of our lifestyle in the house. We ourselves are probably modeling that to the kids. And so more than anything, it's time to look in the mirror and look to see how you've added to the problem. After that, I think it's really important to have that reset meeting, right?
Where you love the reset button.
We're going to hit the reset button because you can't sneak this on to people. You can't say, well, I'm just going to start calling them out and they'll get it. No, you actually do have to bring them to the table and you have to say, okay, listen, guys, what we have been doing has not been working. Here's how I've added to the problem, all right? And that's that humbleness, that humility that you're going to show as a parent, all right? And guys, here's what you're doing, and all of us need to change because our home's not operating very well at all, okay? And then at that point, you're going to state what your new expectation is. Maybe from this point, the phones are only coming out for an hour in the evening, and that's after all the chores are finished. Or, everybody has these responsibilities, and if you don't do them, you don't get your phone the next day, right? Like whatever it is, and just like you said on your last question, whatever it is, we're going to state it, and then we have to enforce it.
Yeah.
And sooner rather than later, right? If your kid's really good for a week, chances are you're going to lax, and then everybody will just fall back into the old way. Yeah. So you'd rather be really firm and strict on this from the get-go. So either your kids are going to hate you for 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, on certain cases, I tell parents, you're getting ready to hit, I'll just say, you're getting ready to walk into hell, and it's probably going to last about 3 months because you're the one that's changing, right? They've been doing what they've been doing, and now you're changing the rules on them, so to speak. And so you have to understand, it's not going to be an easy transfer. Yeah. I would just love it if a kid said, gosh, you're so right.
That makes such sense.
You know what? Yeah. Thanks for being a great mother and father.
By the way, if you don't get this right in the season 3 of parenting, which we call the mentorship stage, then when they are an adult and they should be doing all this stuff on their own, you're still doing for them. And why? Because you did this back in season 3. Season 3 is the time when you're like, hey, let me show you how to do the laundry so you could do it yourself. Hey, let me show you how to change the oil in your car so you can do it yourself. And so that's when you're starting to empower them to be independent adults. But man, if you don't do this right in season 3, season 4 is miserable.
Oh, yeah.
You got 20-something-year-olds that you're still doing their laundry and folding their clothes for them.
And you feel unappreciated and everything else.
And they're like, how did this happen? Guess what? You did it.
Yeah.
So, all right.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so this looks like it's from Ashley, and she's got a daughter here. She has a 10-year-old daughter, and this little girl right now is into blaming everybody else for her mistakes. So she says things like, it's not my fault. She yells, it's not my fault. She doesn't take ownership for what she's doing or not doing. And so how can we help her learn from her mistakes and learn from them?
Yeah. Well, again, learned behavior comes from what we allow, right? And so if you allow this victimhood, if you play victim and you let them play victim, then they'll just keep doing it because it's working for them. Because you'll feel guilty and you'll jump in or rescue them or save them. And so part of it is not really arguing with them, but basically saying, I'm sorry you feel that way, but that's your responsibility.
Right.
And kind of shutting it down. Because if you keep feeding it or arguing against it, I mean, I've done this, you call it Stupidville. Sometimes we'll have this argument and I'm like, what the world? And you'll be like, why'd you go into Stupidville? Why did you engage with that? Because it seems so irrational. It's so ridiculous. But yet when you feed it or argue against it, you just get sucked into that victim vortex, that drama triangle. And so you got to shut it down basically by, just saying, I'm sorry you feel that way, but this is how it's whirl and you're responsible for that.
Yeah. I would, and I'm right with you. I would add to that, admit when you've done wrong as a parent. Admit, don't celebrate. Create.
I made a mistake.
Create the environment early on that everybody makes mistakes.
Good point.
We own them, and then we work to change and make it better, right? Yeah. So if they see that you've said you were sorry or that you've admitted that you broke something or whatever, and the world didn't stop, it's not the end of the world. It'll be a little bit easier for them to handle that.
Good point. So. And I'm guilty of this. You got to be able to let go of their mistakes. Please don't, and you've reminded me of this before, don't keep beating them up over something that happened, because otherwise they are going to shift blame, right? Or lie about it if they feel like they're going to be beat up about it forever. Right. So that's a good point too. So, all right, you ready?
I guess. Which one are you going to throw at me here?
We're raising kids in a Christian household, but we're not sure how to teach them about faith in a way that's relevant. They're not interested in going to church, and they don't seem interested in praying. How can we help them develop a deeper faith life?
You didn't give me any ages of the kids, so it's just kids. So this is a little different based off of age. But I guess maybe what I'll first say to that is it is important that the church that you go to has good kids programming. You were a children's minister, and we found that in the church. I mean, hon, you did a spectacular job building that ministry, not to toot your horn too much for you, but you did a great job, and the entire church body realized how it grew. Right, the congregation grew because the kids couldn't wait to come to church, and so that they couldn't wait. Now well, is it all fun and games? There's fun and games in it, right? There are fun and games in it. We have to be anyone who's ever been a teacher knows that part of the job of teaching is entertaining. And if you say I'm not there to entertain, then you do not understand the idea of teaching. Now, you're not the clown, and that's not your only job, but the entertainment part is what brings the attention in. And then once you grab their attention, then you can land about any story. You can even land a story about Jesus, So I think it's really important that you as the parent, and that can be hard because maybe you've gone to the same church all your life. Maybe you're in the same religion and same faith background, and they don't have that programming. I think, and we had to do this, hon. We had to do this. We had to look around and go, you know what? Our kids are totally empty where we're going right now. We want our family to grow, and we don't want to fight our kids all the time. So I think that's the first thing that I might say off the top. But what I would say also is we never had to fight our kids in the early years at all. Like, I don't remember a single fight on that. In the high school years, they didn't really fight us as much as they maybe didn't want to go to youth group as much or something like that. And that's when we said, in our house, we go to church. And I remember that in my house growing up. Like, I don't remember missing a Sunday. And so, you still have you're the authority in the house, and you're setting the standard and expectation. So I would encourage that strongly to say, well, in our house, and you don't start it when they're 16, right? You start it when they're 8, 9, and 10. Tough. You say, well, no matter what, in our house, we go to church. That's really difficult if you go to church off and on. Right?
You don't make it a priority.
And so even Good point. When we're on vacation, we still try to go to church. We try not to ever skip it because
online.
The kids, the church is not what made us go to heaven, but it's the habit of importance that you keep. And so the kids start to see that and go, okay. So
and again,
less fight.
When we say church, we are the church. The body of Christ is the church. And so corporate worship is kind of what we're talking about. We see an importance in corporate worship. There are some people who choose to do that just in their home with their family. We see a value in connecting with other believers, other families, other kids, other parents. And so we see a value in that. And if you're only going every once in a while, you're not going to develop relationships. And so I've said this story before, but when our 2 older boys were teenagers, I asked them, if you could not come to mom and dad with something heavy and hard, who would you go to? And the men that they chose, because we have boys, the men that they chose were people from the church that I valued them. And I knew that they would be speaking life into our sons. And so you've got to have those people around you. And so if you don't make it a priority and encourage them, and like you said, make it somewhere where they enjoy going, not just for, dodgeball, but, that there's other kids and they're active and they're doing things that relate on their level. It does make a difference. And doing it in home too. It's not just going to church once a week. It's, are you praying together? Are you reading the Bible together? Is there things that you're doing, serving and giving, like the angel tree or, packing meals for Haiti? Like, those are things that help us be the church and really bring our faith to life.
That's good. And, we can all run into our challenges with our kiddos at different times. So it is important that early on they see some fun and enjoyment there. All right, go ahead. Hit me with hit me with your best shot.
All right. This is a 12-year-old who's being bullied by a group of kids at school. He's starting to come home upset and doesn't want to go to school anymore. So how can we help him build self-esteem and stand up to the bullies?
We've done entire shows on bullying.
Yeah.
I'm not going to dismiss the bullying. I'm not going to say you're not being bullied. Okay. So when I was in this school and working with this age group, this was kind of my protocol, and it would be when we went to the stage that every time your kid was looked at funny, he was being bullied.
Yeah.
Right. And so the pendulum swung so far
swing.
the other way.
That's a bully.
Right. And so the protocol that I would use is the first time you just kind of ignore it, right? If they're just being a jerk to you or whatever, you ignore it.
So you're teaching your child first, ignore the bad behavior.
Yeah, ignore it.
First time offense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if it's a hit, if it's a physical hit, then we're going to get somebody involved right away. Okay. But most of the time it's some harassment, it's a name calling, it's that kind of thing. And so we're going to ignore it because that could have just been an emotional outburst. I mean, kids were playing kickball out on the playground and somebody's mad and they call you a bad name and you didn't get bullied.
It's not bullying. Yeah.
Okay. But let's say you go out the next day or two and something similar happens from the same individual back to this little guy.
A pattern.
Guys, as a parent, this is where it's tough because some kids are natural fighters and they'll stand up for themselves. But a lot of kids are not. They're intimidated by the emotion of it. They don't want to get hurt and all of these different things. But this is really where it's important to start to teach your kid to stand up for himself. And I always try to make this as simple as possible, okay? And so literally, guys, this does not have to be you take him to judo class and teach him how to fight. Your first step is to just say to your kid, tell them stop. I mean, you can give them that one word where your kid looks at that kid and says, stop. And as all that is you've put a stake in the ground saying, I've now looked you in the eye and I verbally have addressed the situation because now nobody can say, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was bullying. Right.
I didn't know that you didn't like that. I thought you liked that nickname.
Yeah. And so really, I mean, if I can get the kid to do more, like stop doing that, it hurts me when you do that or whatever. But I will go as simple as to look them in the eye and say, stop. Right. If that doesn't work, if it happens again, all right, the third time we are getting help. So we're going to go to an authority figure in the school. It could be a teacher, it could be a principal, it could be a counselor. We're going to go and we're going to explain to them what has been going on. All right. I would also encourage parents to have the kid tell them what is going on. So bringing the parent into it in terms of telling them, right? So that's where I would go with this. I am not a big advocate for parents running in right off the bat and rescuing the kid because this is really where your kid starts to find out who they are and they can develop a backbone, stand up for themselves.
And he's 12. Yeah. So like he's going to be going, if he's not already in middle school, he's going to be going to middle school and they don't run to mommy and daddy. You want to teach them how to handle it. Ignore it at first, then address it directly. Then if the pattern continues or if it intensifies, then you get some help, right? But man, you don't want to have them feel like they can't fight their own battles.
Yeah.
That's really where the bullying has come from, where we're really not teaching resilience and perseverance and how to deal with conflict resolution.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and somebody will say, well, what, ultimately, what if my kid gets into a fight? And this was our stance, like it or not. Okay, this is what our stance was: defend yourself. Defend you better not throw the first punch, right? Like don't start the fight. But if somebody came onto you and they were attacking you, then we would not just say, roll over. We would say defend yourself. And part of that, and I can't speak for the girl side, but I know in the boy side, part of what builds that self-esteem is just a boy knowing I can do this if I have to. I can stand up for myself. And so that would be our side of that. And
There's
some of you might say, well, you should just
cat fight.
Well, those are the worst.
Oh, man.
That's the only time I ever got punched was between breaking up two girls fighting at the high school, and I was the one that took the sucker punch.
Holy cow. Well, again, we have more questions, but we're kind of running out of time. And so if you have a question, if there's something that is really pressing in your home, in your family, as a mom or a dad or, a son or a daughter, please reach out to us. We would love to walk alongside you and help, and maybe even put it on the podcast. This is what we're here for. This is what we do every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we got more questions, but hey, like you said, if you got more, send them in to us. These are always good to approach. We want to thank our sponsors. Yep. Let's thank Maxwell Construction, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and the Hoosier Ice House. If we can help you, you can go to our website, rocksolidfamilies.org, or give us a call at 812-576-7625. I think that's about all we got.
And as we are wrapping up 2024, we just want to thank you for your support of Rock Solid Families and the Rock Solid Families podcast. We have hundreds of families and businesses and nonprofits that walk alongside us. And if that's you, if you would be willing and interested to partnering with us, we have got some really cool things happening in 2025. We cannot wait for it to get started. And we would love to have you as a partner. So, check out our website at rocksolidfamilies.org, and you can hit the donate button and really partner with us in what we're trying to do. Get these messages out, helping parents, helping couples, helping individuals to find that help and hope in Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for listening to the Rock Solid Families podcast, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day.
Rock Solid Families wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. Casey's has grown to be one of the largest and most unique garden centers and gift shops in the Cincinnati tri-state area. Whether you are looking to take on that next landscape project or simply add a little home decor to your house, Casey's has you covered. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Call them today at 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home. Rock Solid Families wants to thank Maxwell Construction for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. For over 30 years, Maxwell Construction has been a leader in turning dreams into realities, building schools, banks, restaurants, and many other commercial and public facilities. Maxwell Construction has made it their priority to not just build buildings, but to build into their community. So if you have any construction needs, call them at 812-537-2200.
Rock Solid Families would like to thank Hoosier Ice House for being a proud sponsor of the Rock Solid Families podcast. In the heart of historic Lawrenceburg, Indiana, the Ice House is at the corner of Vine and High Streets. The historic building evokes a feeling of comfort with spacious indoor and outdoor dining, a large bar, and comfortable dining areas. Large enough to host parties, yet intimate enough to feel like your favorite neighborhood restaurant. So thank you again for the Hoosier Ice House for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast.